Hello, I'm Glynn Loope, the Director of State Advocacy for the Premium Cigar Association, and it's a pleasure to have everyone here with us today. We'd like to thank Reinhard first and Light 'em Up Lounge for partnering on this important policy summit discussion. We've got an intriguing panel, an international panel, and I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves before we get started with a few questions. Scott Vines from the United Kingdom. Scott.
Good afternoon, Glynn. How are you?
Not bad, sir. Thank you for joining us. What time is it where you are?
It's 3:15 in the afternoon.
Oh, so we're not.
Bedtime. Yeah. So,
not too bad. Well, first of all, before we get kicked off on the discussion, I want you to introduce yourself. Give your background and association with the industry.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to share our insights into the UK market. I own a company called Tor. We are the leading importer for cigars from Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican Republic, and Mexico. I also own a diplomatic cigar club in London, which has been copied somewhere else in the world. So we created that back in 2019 with a co-founder, Riccardo Carione. And the idea there was to create some diplomacy with cigars and get the politicians from each of the 193 countries that are represented in London involved in the cigar industry. So I'm a proud owner of both of those. I've been in the industry nearly 40 years next year. So I've been through a lot of regulation, and I'm still here to fight for more. Interesting what Scott said at the beginning about the way the Americans approach things. We approach things slightly differently in the UK. Different results, perhaps, but it'll be interesting to share what we do, not just as Tor, but also as an industry to fight the fight to protect hand-made cigars. But thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and I'm sure you've been at one of my favorite places on earth, Edward and Eddie's shop at the Davidoff of London. It's one of my favorite spots in the world.
Yeah, two superb gentlemen, really are.
And then they graciously walked me just around the corner to JJ Fox. Not to belabor a personal point, but I've got to tell you this quick story. Is I turned 60 on Monday. For my 50th birthday, my wife took me to London. And Edward and Eddie asked me what I was going to do. And so I spent my 50th birthday smoking cigars in Winston Churchill's front yard at Chartwell.
Wow. Wow. There you go. But yeah, well, we call that the golden mile of cigars.
For really good reasons.
A lot of history around the corner. It's a fantastic place. So we're very lucky.
All I prayed for was when I sat in Churchill's chair at JJ Fox, I said, "Don't let it break for me."
You're not the only one. God help anyone who does that.
Well, to kick off our discussion, I wanted to ask you, the UK has undergone the Brexit debate, and this may or may not have impacted your trade relationships and your approach to your business. Can you elaborate on how Brexit has impacted the cigar trade in particular, throughout Europe?
Yeah, well, certainly I'll be parochial for the UK because obviously it's affected us more than it's affected Europe. Whether they want us back or not is another story. But yeah, one of the things, Glynn, that it made us have to do is look at our supply chain, because many of the cigar makers that we deal with had opened up European hubs. The idea being that a lot of the importers like ourselves could order on a regular basis in whatever quantity we wanted to buy. Because we then had to negotiate trade deals with every country, when I say we, I mean Great Britain, we lost our country of origin status, which Europe had, which meant we had to revisit and rechange our whole supply chain. So instead of buying from hubs in Belgium, Germany, Holland, etc., we now ship direct from the factory gate. So what's actually happened is actually given us access to more brands instead of just what they had in stock in the European hubs. And it also means that we carry more stock.
We'll circle back on the trade discussion in just a little bit during the course of our panel discussion. I want to bring in Scott Regina, who is the new president of the Premium Cigar Association, to join our discussion. And Scott is a longtime friend in the industry and not only head of the PCA, but plays a key leadership role with our state association in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So, Scott, why don't you introduce yourself and your association with the industry?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, good afternoon. Scott, nice to meet you. Glynn, are you gonna tell us what you have in the works for your 60th birthday? How do you top that one for 50?
I can't disclose it at this juncture.
I hear you. Great. So yeah, my name's Scott Regina. I'm the current president of the Premium Cigar Association. I'm here in Washington D.C. right now. I'm a second generation retailer out of Virginia. My father-in-law started our company in 1975, coming up on 50 years of our company being around. I've personally been in the business for just over 15 years. But the name of our company is Emerson Cigars. We're based in southeastern Virginia. We currently have 5 retail stores. And as Glynn mentioned, I've not only involved with everything that we do here at the PCA, but also involved with the efforts that we do from an advocacy standpoint in the state of Virginia.
Thanks, Scott. And we're going to shift to this side of the pond, if you will. I want you to elaborate on the current trends shaping the premium cigar industry in the United States and how that may correlate to what you hear about what's happening with the industry globally.
Yeah,
Where
sure.
do you think this is going in the United States?
Yeah, so I mean, the last let's say 3 years, 4 years have been quite interesting, right? With the pandemic, the COVID pandemic in the world, and you would almost think that it would have the opposite effect of the cigar business, but the business has been really strong. There's many new cigar stores that have opened over the last couple of years in the United States. I would say that those new cigar stores tend to trend kind of a newer age format where there's a lounge concept, or there's also the ability to pair it with different types of spirits. But a lot of excitement in the cigar business here in the States. We see that normalizing a little bit over the last 6 to 9 months, but have had some very strong years, let's say the past 2 or 3 years. In terms of what we're seeing for the actual profiles of the cigars, we're still seeing a lot of growth in the larger formats. The larger ring gauge cigars tend to continue to be very popular. And then I was mentioning this earlier. It seems like, especially at this last year's PCA trade show, we're definitely seeing more and more cigar companies kind of stepping into that more of that luxury price point, the higher price point. So I think this past year at the trade show was the most cigars that I've seen over in the United States, at least over $100 plus in terms of price. So definitely seeing price going up, definitely seeing companies kind of stepping into more of that higher price point luxury cigar, and still seeing a lot of growth in the larger formats. And I would also say, the more medium to fuller bodied flavor profiles of the cigars. And
Scott Vines, before we get into a regulatory question, I wanted to ask you. Say that again, Scott, Regina.
Well, I was going to ask Scott, what are they seeing in terms of price and formats of cigars in the UK?
Yeah, I'm shaking. I was nodding my head a lot to what you were saying, Scott, because we're seeing much more excitement in the industry. We're seeing investment. We're seeing cigar lounges opening up. Recently, we had the Peninsula Hotel open up in London, a magnificent hotel overlooking Buckingham Palace with a new cigar lounge. And there's a lot of investment going into called sampling lounges, to give them the correct name. The market itself, we went through a buoyant phase of growth during the COVID years. I would say this year it's flattened again. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting because around Europe we hear stories of, there's been supply issues from, one certain Caribbean country, but we haven't experienced the same thing in the UK. We seem the importer has done a very good job in maintaining supply. Whether the UK's had special treatment, I don't know. But what we have seen is a lot of people trying to enter this market. In the last 12 months in particular, I've seen more, and we've had so many people knocking on our door. We're importers. We can only work with so many brands, but we're getting bombarded with requests for everybody has the new best cigar that's going to take over the world. And in the past we'd jumped on it, but now we're having to say no because the market's getting pretty close to saturation.
Yeah.
We don't have the size of humidors that you guys have got, and that's driven mainly because of the high taxation. We're the California of Europe. Yeah, we're super expensive. So UK consumers, sadly, when people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I work for the government because I give them all the tax. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what UK cigar smokers are doing. They're paying the government so much tax. So our prices are high already. So people who smoke cigars are used to high prices, and it's become the norm, sadly.
Yep.
It really has.
Scott Vines, we get the newsletters from the European Cigar Manufacturers Association and follow the information that they provide. And I noticed there's a lot of information about the cigarette industry and tobacco as a whole, mass market products, as well as the premium cigar industry. How do you navigate that regulatory environment? And do you have to? We've had to take a lot of measures in the United States in this regard to differentiate the different segments of the market so that there's separate and distinct regulatory treatment of different products. Do you have to take that approach, and how do you see the evolution going of the European regulatory environment? Because I know that there's a lot of FDA bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. watching what happens globally. And what happens in Europe has a way of spreading in this regard. They watch tobacco control as well. How do you see that regulatory environment evolving, and what direction do you think it's going into in the European market?
Well, first of all, I should congratulate the PCA on the work they've done with the FDA. That's fantastic, and we'd only dream that what happens in America, which in most other industries happens everywhere else, follows. The other way, I agree with you, Glynn, is quite serious. I mean, we as a company, we do our own lobbying, but we're also part of an industry group that we collectively fund with a general secretary, and we tackle the lobbying process through members of parliament, through the diplomatic arena, to try and win some battles. The way we've had to tackle, if you take the standardized packaging that came, oh my goodness, 4 or 5 years ago, the way we tackled that, because we were caught in the crossfire of cigarettes, was we managed to differentiate between a cigarillo under 3 grams and a premium cigar over 3 grams. So cigarillos under 3 grams were treated the same way as a cigarette, and a handmade cigar above 3 grams were treated as a separate product category completely, which got us exemptions on the standardized packaging labeling. In terms of what's coming, you're obviously aware of track and trace, or you'll have read about track and trace, which is coming across every country in Europe. There's a standard template, and every country can do their own little bit here and there to change it, make it stronger, and so on. We thought Brexit would be an advantage because we'd no longer be part of Europe, so we wouldn't have to follow it, but so wrong we were. So we have track and trace coming in May 2024. As a business, this is a considerable expense. We've been working on this for almost a year now, and as a business, we will be ready. And if there's any importers watching this in the UK, if they haven't started working on it now, come May 20th next year, it's going to be very difficult for them to be compliant because it takes a lot of resource, time, finance to actually make it happen. So it's not just putting a sticker on a box. That's the end result. There's lots of other things that have to be done with software, hardware, space in warehouse. So it's a massive investment, but it's business critical if we want to be an importer. So we tackled that head on, and we will be ready in plenty of time. The biggest legislative issue is obviously you read the recent. Our Prime Minister came out with a soundbite about a generational smoking ban to copy New Zealand. So in my almost 40 years, that's probably going to be one of the hardest things to challenge. It's a stupid thing. You're going to have a crazy situation whereby people in their 30s, somebody's 35, can buy a cigar, but somebody 33 won't be able to, and so on. You can go through the years. And it's going to drive tobacco products in general underground, because people will move away from the legitimate marketplace where they have to be age verified to buy what they want. The reason why it's very complicated is our government threw it out on the table as a soundbite because they're going through a bad time. So it's an easy thing to get a win.
Yeah.
And they made it known that it would be a free vote, which means every member of parliament can have a vote on it without party politics being involved. So, of course, the opposition party straight away said, yeah, we'll support this. So we're like, shit. What that means is we've got 650 MPs who can have their own vote, whereas historically, when it comes to legislation, most of it's governed by one party driving it. So we've got to tackle how we approach this to get, I think it's 326 MPs to push against this. But then if it goes to the House of Lords, and I'm not sure it has to, there's 781 members of that. So we've got a bit of a job on our hands. As I say, we have an industry committee for
And
importers.
correct me if I'm wrong, I've gotten mixed messages about this. Is it all tobacco products, just cigarettes, or cigars included?
Yeah, they've just started the consultation process, Glynn. So we have until early December to put forward submissions. At the moment in the submission, in the consultation, there are questions regarding whether or not it should be all tobacco products. So obviously we're gathering our information at the moment, and we're coming up with a strategy how to tackle this. I mean, we're already getting mixed messages because, back in April when the health and care bill was first announced, we had the head of primary care MP came out, and I'll quote him, "We are working on personal responsibility and help for people to quit. We want to focus on the help to stop people quit rather than follow the New Zealand model." So that was the health minister in April. And we just believe that this has been thrown on the table as a soundbite because our government is getting everything's bad at the moment. They needed a headline to take away from the bad.
Right.
And sadly, we also have a unique situation in the UK. Maybe it's the same in America. This law is only for England. So each country in the UK is devolved. The health is a devolved area. So Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland have their own health authorities and have their own ability to create their own legislation. And of course, they've all jumped on the bandwagon and say, if you do this, we'll follow you. So not only do we have the 650 MPs in the House of Parliament, we've got the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, and the Northern Ireland Assembly, how we address. So it's a really complex. It's not as easy as just throwing an email at someone. It's a very complex issue. And my concern is it started in New Zealand. The UK is very much a heritage marketplace for the cigar industry. And this would be a big win for the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, you have a steamroll. So the next 8 weeks for us are very critical, how we handle it and how we will be asking the PCA for guidance and help on work they've done with the FDA.
Absolutely.
We'll be working with the diplomats it's great that you've got a session on here with the diplomats to talk about the importance of cigars to their country. The retailers have their own association, which again will be helping them with the story they have to tell. And then we need to work out a consumer program. So there's a lot to do in less than 8 weeks.
Absolutely. And we want to help you in any way possible. And that's a segue to Scott Regina. Just to demonstrate how bad ideas spread, it started in New Zealand with the generational ban as well as plain packaging. But to show how bad ideas spread, last year the legislator from California introduced a generational smoking ban based upon what happened in New Zealand.
Yes.
Yesterday, I learned that there's probably going to be one introduced in Massachusetts. I could pick out parts of the United States where it could very, very easily be introduced. Scott, Regina, could you elaborate on what direction you think the regulatory environment is going? Despite the FDA victory in court, they are appealing, but there's a lot of other facets at the state level and regional level that the regulatory environment is impacted by. What direction do you think the United States is going in this regard, dovetailing on what Mr. Vines just elaborated upon?
Yeah. There's something that I learned from you probably about, let's say, 15 years ago when we walked the halls for the first time in the capital in Virginia. And one of the things that you said to me was when we were there working on a particular issue, you said, listen, at the end of the day, we are here because when something comes across a legislator's desk that has anything to do with cigars, our goal is at least to get them to pick up the phone and give us a phone call so we can have that conversation. Too many times things happen and we're too late to being able to deal with the situation. I think that to your point, a lot of times when bad legislation gets introduced, it spreads to other states. I think being out in front of it is the key. And if there's ways that we can help influence international markets, like what you're talking about, Scott, anything that we can do to help, please let us know, and we'll be that resource. The last 4 years, we've obviously went through our times of considerable stress with the FDA, but we recently got a ruling that gave us some at least some relief for now until the court case works its way through. But that it doesn't stop there, right? I mean, we still need to be diligent. And from a retail perspective, the things that we were really focused on that had to do with the regulations was, one, the warning labels, right? When we started hearing that the warning labels were going to, impact the decorations and there were neat descriptions that all these products have in the humidors and start to envision what the humidor in the United States might look like with all these warning labels all over the place. That was a big concern from the retail standpoint. The other thing that was really concerning for us as retailers was the ability to be able to market our stores. Listen, at the end of the day, it's not as easy as it was 10 years ago, right? The retailers don't have the same tools that they've had to be able to, whether it's use the internet or social media or just being able to advertise and promote their business. And so putting more restrictions on being able to retailers advertise their great businesses was a big concern of us. And then the final thing that we really kind of zeroed in on was new products is what drives the business in our stores. And so for us, being able to keep that path to market for manufacturers to be able to innovate and introduce new products. And right now we have relief from those three. And so those, I would say, are going to continue to be a focus on our part. to make sure that retailers have the environment that they need to be able to continue to be successful.
Scott, Regina, could you elaborate upon how you're partnering with other industries or initiating creative approaches to grow your business? How do you see the manufacturers being more creative or innovative, and how they are going about their business to be able to ensure sustainable growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of similarities with the cigar business as there are with other industries in the United States, in particular the spirits or the brewery businesses or the wine businesses. I can tell you personally, 3 years ago we launched a new concept for our business where we actually partnered with a brewery and we opened up a cigar store inside of a brewery. So we now have a 20,000 square foot operation. Half of it is an event space. About 5,000 is manufacturing, and then we have a cigar room that has probably about 200 facings of cigars in it, a 50-person cigar bar, a tasting room, and a 1-acre beer garden where you can enjoy cigars out in the beer garden. And so, it's a natural fit. At first, it wasn't really quite sure of it, but we were able to find a lot of similarities in the manufacturing process, and similarities with customers coming in and having the opportunity to learn about cigars or learn about beer and how those can be paired. And it's really been an exciting project. It's much different than our traditional stores where we've had the buyer that's comfortable with coming in and maybe purchasing a box of cigars. This store is more of your onesie twosies. Pair it with a beer, use it for education. Use it for kind of developing that experience with handmade cigars.
Now, see, Scott Vines, now all the retailers in London are going to want a beer garden.
Well, you see the stores in London, many of them are landlocked.
Yeah, they are.
They put a chair out on the pavement, and Westminster Council come along and tell them to put it back in the store again. But as an importer, we work with retailers very, very closely. We run all of our cigar events. Last year, we did 98 cigar events around the UK. And I would say the majority of them we pair with a whiskey, rum, gin, tea. We're British. Why not? And so we're pairing is very, very good. And it brings a new audience to the events. Some people come for the whiskey and then the cigar. Some people come for the whiskey, cigar, then the whiskey. And, being a Scotsman, as you can probably tell, we have a very close connection with the whiskey industry across the UK. And more of our retailers are going down the same route. Not to the same scale as you, Scott. I mean, you've just described the whole of the UK market, I think, in your one store. But more and more retailers, it's unusual now for a store to open unless it has a lounge, right, or the ability to smoke outside, or it has to have the ability to have a drink. So very, very much the same. So it's the same concept. There's nothing new really. It's just how just doing it. Yeah.
Yep.
I've got to ask you, Scott Vines. Last month I was in Ireland for a few days, and first time I've been into a cigar shop since plain packaging had come about, at least there. Yeah. So I went into this shop in Dublin, and I took a picture of a humidor, and I didn't know that they did not remove the original band.
Correct.
They simply wrapped the plain packaging band over the existing band. So I took a picture of this Fuente cigar and sent it to Carlito. And I said, this is garbage. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. I've got to ask you as an authority on this subject. And given that this broadcast has an international audience, and there are people, despite the legal complications, trying to push such things in the United States, has plain packaging really affected consumer behavior at all, or is it simply regulatory theater?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we call it standard packaging. So as I say, we managed to get an exemption from what they have in Ireland in the UK, thankfully. The guys in Ireland, we work with the guys in Ireland. There's only 3 stores. They're all on Grafton Street in the middle of Dublin. And we work with the guys over there quite closely. They will tell you that it hasn't affected the market. But it could be the Irish way, where, they've got away with putting these horrible green and brown bands over the top of a Monte Cristo or a Perdomo or whatever. Whether that's technically the way it should be done is another story, but it seems to have been accepted. So as long as that continues, I don't see a problem. And the guys over there are all saying that the market is good. It's a very small, tiny market, but for them it's good and it gives them a good living. So it hasn't had the impact perhaps that the legislators were hoping for.
That's the message. That's the message.
Mm-hmm.
I want to shift gears just a little bit in that we all know that the premium cigar industry is grounded into a very historic and culturally significant history. And yet we've got a whole new generation of cigar manufacturers breaking into the market with far more, I almost call it bold approaches to marketing, whether it's in packaging, events, the way they convey the presence of their companies. How do you balance, both of you answer this question, how do you balance the sort of the new generation of manufacturers with those that are more, shall we say, historically grounded? Does that make sense?
Yeah, is that for me?
Yeah, both of you. You go first, Mr. Vines.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, as I was saying earlier, we get approached by many companies. But the one thing many of them haven't worked out is how to actually export. So there's a lot of American brands which will email randomly, hey, I've got this, da 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 da. Then you start asking them questions about, the registration process, da 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 da, to actually get the cigars into the market. And as I say, we're a very small market. We're a fraction. We're the enamel on the teeth compared to the American market. So we don't have the ability to actually put the cigars anywhere. So this year we've seen a lot of manufacturers enter the market on small scale. There's a lot of innovation in terms of packaging. But you've also got to remember, by the time we put our health warnings on and stuff, then a lot of the wonderful, pretty designs are then covered up. So it's good to see the innovation. It's good to see competition, and it's good to see people trying to do it. But as I say, one of my kind of bugbears is that people have got to understand how to actually export to create distribution before they decide, hey, can I just sell my cigars in another country? Every country has rules and regulations, and we have to comply with them as a business. So it's interesting, really interesting. Yeah.
Scott, Regina, take about 60 seconds and elaborate on that.
I think that I have a very similar point of view to Scott. I mean, the reality is while I would like to carry every brand, I simply don't have the room to carry every brand, right? I mean, there's only so much room for us to be able to display in the humidors, and I really tried to be fair about it and give people a shot. But the reality is there's only so much space available. But oftentimes what we look at when we're trying to make decisions in terms of new products to consider for our stores, oftentimes what I think some of the most important things are missed by the manufacturers, right? I mean, yeah, of course, first and foremost, the product's got to be something that you think the consumer wants. The packaging, it all needs to be appealing to the consumer. But there's more that goes into it for a retailer to be successful with that brand. What is the cigar producer willing to do in terms of training staff and the support that's available to market the product and merchandising, right? And so to your point earlier, oftentimes they think we can just come out with a product and we're going to start selling it, but but there's more to it than that, right? And that sometimes is missed.
Yeah. So I'm glad you agree, Scott, because I'm glad I'm not on my own with that one. You're right. People don't understand that it has to be an education process. You can't just put a product on the shelf.
We're going to have to wrap up our panel for real quick, though. I want to apologize for not having our Canadian friends on the broadcast with us, but I want to highlight one quick anecdote regarding Canada. Our friend Jeff Borshowitz with Corona Cigar Company in Florida was in Canada. And, you know, a box of Julius Caesar, J.C. Newman Julius Caesars, I think is about, maybe $350 in the United States. Jeff was in a Canadian cigar shop and he took a picture and put it on Facebook, and that exact same box of cigars was $999.
Mm.
Mr. Vines, you've got the true global perspective if anybody does. We can talk about plain packaging, generational smoking bans, everything else they throw at us. But the tax question is the one that seems to be absolutely universal.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on fighting that, rolling it back, making the case that they shouldn't apply to premium handmade cigars? What are your thoughts?
It's a continuous battle, Glynn. Unfortunately, the government is getting their money. So why should we change anything? Yeah, that's their attitude. They're getting their money, and what's the incentive for them to change? They don't want to see any charts going that way. They want to see the charts going that way. So it's a continuous battle. We have another government duty budget in November next month. No doubt we'll have another increase on duty next month. We've already lobbied and pushed to say, come on, guys, freeze, cost of living crisis. You've got to help people here. We'll see. Last year, we got a no increase. But then in March, they took a 12% increase. So there you go. So we thought we'd won a battle, and then they came over the hill with the cavalry in March.
Well, it sounds like another great reason we need unity in the industry, not just in the United States, not just in England, but worldwide, to help to preserve and protect this wonderful industry. I want to thank our panel. I appreciate you folks joining us, taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Scott, Regina's downstairs, literally for another day of PCA business. Mr. Vines, let's stay in close contact on this generational smoking ban proposal, and we look forward to sharing with you any and all information we've got that can assist in your battle.
Appreciate that, Glynn. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Scott.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.